Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great delight to see everyone here. I'm Dr. Tom Kelchner. I'm very proud to be the Regional Advocacy Director for the East Houston and Gulf Coast areas for Raise Your Hand, Texas. We are delighted this evening to partner with the Brazosport Independent School District to present tonight's House District 25 candidate discussion. We will make introductions in a few moments, but at this time, would you please stand with me as the Brazosport ISD Junior Air Force Color Guard, under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel Larry Baker, United States Air Force retired, present the colors. Ladies and gentlemen, let's join together to honor our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let us honor our great state. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, Color Guard. Let's give these young people a great hand. Please be seated. We are very proud as the Raise Your Hand Texas Foundation to provide communities across the state the opportunity to participate in public education-focused conversations ahead of 2020 March primaries. We're hosting more than 40 candidate forums, nonpartisan forums across the state, as well as some town halls. We focus exclusively on public education-related issues. The goal of these events, of course, is to give Texans an opportunity to hear directly from candidates and their views that affect teachers, students, parents, and community members. The Raise Your Hand Texas Foundation is committed to supporting public education in Texas by increasing awareness of public education issues and cultivating a pro-public education constituency across the state. We are nonpartisan, we do not endorse candidates, but we do believe that every legislative session should be a public education session because the future of Texas is in our public schools. We're delighted to have our House District 25 candidates here this evening for this critical conversation. So it's my honor to introduce Mr. Troy Brimage, Ms. Robin Garrett, Patrick Henry, Mr. Mitch Spains, and Mr. Cody Fasu. I want to again just recognize and thank each of these candidates for their time in participating in this discussion this evening. It is indicative of the level of service and integrity each of them have. Planning this event has been a true pleasure as we've collaborated with a fantastic team from Brazosport ISD, from the registration table to the pre-planning to everything going on this evening. So it's been a great partnership. We'll do some more thank yous later after the program, but it is now my honor to turn the program over to our moderators. Mr. Danny Massey, Superintendent of Schools for Brazosport ISD, and Ms. Catherine Fiedler, Senior from Brazosport High School. Mr.
Thank
Massey.
you. Thank you all for coming. It is my pleasure to introduce some superintendents that we have in the room. As you know, House District 25 covers multiple school districts in the area, and so I was so glad to see walk in the door this evening my mentor and former Angleton ISD Superintendent Dr. Pat Montgomery. Stand up. Doesn't she look great? Every time I see somebody that's retired, they look great. Also from Angleton ISD is Dr. Phil Edwards. Dr. Marshall Scott from Bay City ISD gives his regrets. He is unable to be here. He wants to thank Raise Your Hand for putting this on. He is actually receiving an award tonight at the Texas Southern University College of Education. Our Columbia Brazoria ISD, Mr. Stephen Galloway is here. And Sweeney ISD, Dr. Tori Hill. And from Van Vleck ISD, Mr. John O'Brien. Also, the president of this beautiful university at Brazosport College, Dr. Melissa Ballack. Thank you for being here. If we have any board of trustees, board members of our local ISDs, will you please stand up so we can thank you? Thank you all for being here. Are there any other elected officials here with us today? Would you please stand up? There you go. Well, thank you for your service. It is my pleasure to introduce our reader tonight is Brazoswood Senior Catherine Fiedler. She is a speech and debate captain, and I like to call her a champion because she's a champion also. She runs cross country. She will graduate in a few months with academic honors. Her interests are politics and sports, and her parents are here joining us tonight. Also, Jim and Sherry Fiedler. Welcome. Because I am a teacher and we have a room full of teachers, we have to come to some rules or agreements for how we're going to act tonight. So these are our ground rules for tonight. We expect a friendly, courteous discourse this evening. Panelists respond directly to the prompted questions rather than fellow panelists. Do not interrupt fellow candidates when they are responding to a question. Candidates may not address questions or comments to other candidates or engage in personal attacks. Audience, we ask that you not boo or make disparaging remarks. Applause will be held until the end of the forum. Maintain an atmosphere of respect. Refrain from applauding or any other expression of approval or disapproval during the question and answer period. We will show our appreciation to the candidates at the conclusion of the event. Please do not attempt to distribute campaign materials anywhere other than the designated areas outside. We are live streaming this event. We are on Facebook Live on the Raise Your Hand Texas, East Houston Gulf Coast, and the Brazosport ISD Facebook page. So please text your friends that aren't here and tell them they could listen in live. And it will be posted for recording also if anyone wants to go back and watch it. So please silence your cell phones because of that, and warning that you may be recorded if you say anything out there. Yeah. Thank you again for being here, and let's get to it.
So candidates, in your opening statement, you'll have 3 minutes to introduce yourself and tell us about you and your family's experience with Texas Public Schools. Mr. Brummage?
Good evening, and thank you for having me here today. It's actually a very exciting night because of public schools. I have 2 children graduating this year, seniors at Brazosport High School, and my daughter, Brianna Nicole Brummage, received her letter from Texas A&M last night. So she will be traveling to College Station, and my son will be attending Glenn in College Station and then transferred to Texas A&M. And again, I credit that to public. For teachers that went and turned Lanier Middle School from the bottom to the top. And I was very excited and proud to be and honored to be a part of that as well. And if elected, I will continue to do that in office in Austin. The other thing, I was elected to mayor of Freeport for 2 terms, where, as you know, we just uncovered a large amount of corruption there in the city and was able to get a 10-year conviction out of that corruption. And that, again, is the same thing that I will continue to do if elected. And so I ask for your support and your vote for state representative for District 25. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Ms. Garrett?
Hi, thank you. I'm Robin Garrett, and I'm running in the Republican primary to be the next House Representative for District 25. I grew up in Danbury, and I went to public schools in Danbury, graduating from high school from Angleton High School. I'm a proud product of Missouri County Public Schools, and I have lots of great memories of those times and those teachers who meant so much to me. My children attended Angleton Public Schools, and my son and daughter-in-law have been public school teachers. I have 3 grandchildren that have attended public school, and my granddaughter has also received her letter from A&M, so I'll be an Aggie grandma too. I have deep ties to our schools here and will support our public schools. For those of you that do not know me, I've been the Missouri County Tax Assessor Collector for nearly 20 years, and I have served in the tax office for 16 years prior to that, and it's been the greatest honor and experience of my life. I'm now asking voters of this district to allow me to write the next chapter as our next state representative. I'm not a politician, I'm a servant, but I'm a servant with knowledge and experience that knows how to get things done. Keeping in line with Republican Party philosophy and my Christian beliefs, my only agenda will be the one that is set by citizens of the district. The job of state representative will be my only job. I have nothing to gain personally by seeking this position. I seek this office only out of my love for the citizens of the district and the state of Texas. I'm the most qualified in the campaign to address issues important to taxpayers. I've been involved in the legislative process for over 20 years and have a 35-year working knowledge history of the Texas Property Tax Code. My job as tax assessor collector is to implement the laws that lawmakers make. I haven't had the authority to write the laws or actually vote on the bills, and I can advocate for you, the taxpayer, which I have. And even when it's not been real popular, I've had to comply with those laws. But ultimately, I cannot write the bill or vote on the bill that sets the status quo. I'm now asking HD 25 voters to allow me to be the lawmaker and bring the full force of my experience to bear in these matters. I'm the only candidate in this race qualified to represent taxpayers, and I will have the ability to have an immediate impact. I am Republican. I believe in the Republican Party principles: Second Amendment right to bear arms, right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, smaller government, and your right to a safer community. I'm proven, I'm trusted, I'm reliable, and I'm committed. I'm Robin Garrett, and I ask for your vote and support as your next state representative. I have a website, robingarrett.com, and I have a Facebook page, Robin Garrett Campaign. Please like and share. Thank you.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank BISD, Mr. Massey, Ms. Fielder, and Raise Your Hand Texas for this opportunity. My name is Patrick Henry, and I'm running for state representative in House District 25. Mi nombre es Patrick Henry y estoy postulando para representante estatal en el Distrito 25. I am a teacher. I taught high school special education for 34 years. 28 years at Angleton High School. I currently teach English as a second language to adults at Brazosport College. I was an Angleton City Council member for 10 years. I was a mayor pro tem for 4.5 years and a mayor for 4.5 years. While on council, we balanced 19 budgets, built buildings and parks, weathered hurricanes and flooding, and we put the infrastructure in place for Angleton to grow. I know how to build consensus. I finish what I start. I've been a youth soccer coach, twice past president of the Angleton Noon Lions Club, a race director for the Spectacle Spectacular 10K and 5K that raised $30,000 over the years for glasses and exams for local children. I'm currently church council president at St. John Lutheran Church. My wife, Kathy, raise your hand if you had Kathy for a teacher or worked with her. Yeah, she's a super teacher. We're both second generation Americans. We're products of public education. And I have a confession to make. I did attend a private school. There was no public kindergarten in Kentucky in 1962, and my mom and dad probably spent 2 summer vacations worth of their money to put me in private kindergarten. I'm the first Henry to graduate from high school and college.
Involved with it. My aunt's the music teacher at Westside Elementary. If you've ever been to a 5th grade pageant that they've had, a musical, Parish put that on. My mother, Pella, we got several board members from Angleton ISD here. Some of them, Regina, was on the board with my mom. She was a school board member at Angleton ISD for 9 years. And I remember one of the coolest things was anytime they build a new school, I'd get that architectural packet as a 12-year-old kid and read through it. It was wonderful. Coolest thing ever. It's a cool thing to have your mom as a school board member. She gave me my diploma. Public education matters to my family. I went through public school all the way out through college. I went to A&M, got a bachelor's and master's in business. I went to UH Law, where I got my law degree, and I've been working as an attorney at Baker Hostetler in Houston ever since. When I came back from A&M, started working, I decided to move back to this area. We educate a lot of kids that move away, but I came back because it's important to me to reinvest in my community, and I've sought to do that. I sought to do that through Revive, a Bible study that meets on Brazos Court College, just very close by here. I've done that through being on the board of directors of the Pregnancy Health Center, and I did that on Angleton City Council. I'd encourage you to compare the candidates, study the candidates, and check me out at votevasuit.com. I'd be honored to earn your vote, and I am 100% for you in public education. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Basu.
All right, now to the questions.
Okay, our first question regarding school finance, Ms. Garrett. Texas ranks 43rd among the states in per-student spending for public schools. House Bill 3 was an historic investment, but many are concerned it is not sustainable. In your opinion, what was House Bill 3's single greatest accomplishment? Would you support additional investment in public schools? And how would you make that investment sustainable?
It goes without saying that tax money going into our kids' education needs to be placed in the classroom first and foremost. One of the main reasons I'm running for state representative is to strike a balance between the taxpayer and local government. So school finance is an excellent example of a place where this balance needs to be better struck. My thoughts on 2 great accomplishments of House Bill 3, spearheaded by Senator Larry Taylor, were 1, the raise for teachers was a big step, and the second greatest accomplished was the compression of the tax rate. We will be in the 2nd year of that compression with this year's tax bills. Compression of the rate decreases property taxes at the local levy level in the funding of our schools and increases the state's portion of that funding. You can make it sustainable by continuing with compression of that tax rate at the local level until the state share of funding of schools is at least 50%. It would be an objective of mine to get to a point where the state share and local share are equal, 50-50 each. There's still work to be done to lower school district taxes while increasing the state's contribution in the funding of school districts in our state. And I will be working hard towards solutions for a 50-50 split between the state and local government. Having participated in the property tax process in the trenches, I will be ready for the 87th legislative session, as I will be working with all 8 of our school districts, including the other districts that I collect for, in the implementation of HB3 and SB2. I will have firsthand knowledge of what didn't work, what needs to be fixed, how it can be improved to make a difference for taxpayers. My experience will allow me to see the possibility of unintended consequences before they become law. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Mr. Henry?
Well, 43rd is not acceptable for Texas. It's hard to pick what I consider the greatest achievement of House Bill 3, and I will mention several others later, but I think the extension of the pre-K program is the greatest accomplishment of HB 3. It gives economically disadvantaged students a chance at a more equal footing with children whose parents couldn't afford a private preschool. I think the idea of universal pre-K should and will become as accepted as universal kindergarten is today. This should be also should be a key to reaching the HB 3's third grade goals. More children in preschool will be better prepared for kindergarten, which will be better prepared for the reading tasks they need to accomplish by the third grade. I actually subbed today in a kindergarten class, and it was the most brutal day of my life. Early childhood, pre-K, and kindergarten teachers are superheroes. The legislature must sustain and grow investment in public education. It must receive first priority every session. Parents, teachers, administrators, legislators must also call for accountability in all state programs. We could start with the $90 million a year we spend on STAR testing. Mike Collier's plan to close the ill-named equal and uniform loophole could raise $5 billion a year. Giant corporations should have the same property valuation rules as mom and pop cleaners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Thames?
You know, it's a funny thing about House Bill 3, I was playing golf with Dan Huberty, and we were talking, and he foresaw the session. He said, I guarantee you that the session will be all about education. And I said, well, why is that? He said, because 72% of the teachers voted in the last election. They're paying attention to who's voting. It wasn't an accident that HB 3 was so prominent in the session. It was because of you and going to the polls and voting. They are watching. That means a lot, especially when it goes to Austin. Now, I don't know where the $5,000 per teacher was translated when it got down. I've seen some raises in the thousands of dollars. I even saw some great rates bonuses that were handed out. And so I didn't see that it made 5,000, but I could have missed something somewhere else. But to continue with HB 3 past the budgeted cycle, I've got a couple of ideas. And one is for you to continue to vote. But two, I'd like to tie it to the rainy day fund, similar to the way we've tied transportation. So when the rainy day fund exceeds a certain amount, then there is a percentage or two or more that comes off of that and is earmarked for education. Today we're doing that with transportation. Let's do it for something that's a lot, I don't know that it's a lot more important, but it's just as important, and that's education. That'll move us forward. The last thing real quick is allow our state comptroller to invest the rainy day fund. And let's use that money that they invest. It can be safe. Your teacher retirement is safe retirement. All of the cities and counties invest. Let's invest that $15+ billion and use that money to come back for education.
Thank you, Mr. Thames. Mr. Basu?
There are a lot of great things about HB 3. If I had to pin it on the greatest, I think it's the increase of the basic allotment. Just the state of Texas stepping up and increasing basic allotment funding for our schools. There's more to be done. We have to get state funding up to 50% to match local taxes, but we have to increase investments into the classroom by raising the basic allotment even more. We need to also put built-in indexes into these funding formulas so that we don't have transportation funding going for 20+ years without being adjusted. We should be adjusting things yearly. So there's a lot of good things. Property tax compression is another. When I think about sustainability of HB 3, it's not fully funded. We've got to find the funding in order to make sure that we continue along this path of investing in public ed. We can't have a legislative session come up in the 87th that goes the opposite direction and moves us back to where we were at 38-62 on the split. We need to get to 50-50. When I think also about what can we do to make it more sustainable, I think we have to improve the funding sources for public schools across the board, not just what we put into the foundation account to get that to 50-50, but we have to better invest the permanent school fund. If you've seen an article in the Chronicle, Broken Trust, talks about how we've been underperforming in our permanent endowment compared to other states. We have to address that. There's a study going on by the legislature in the interim right now, and I'm looking forward to that being a priority in the 87th legislature to make sure that we're maximizing the return on our endowment to put more money into classrooms. So I think across the board, it's making sure that we do not reduce spending in public education, but we increase it going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Basu. Mr. Brimage?
It was a good start. It increased the basic allotment per student and reduced the recapture payments, which was important. It reduced property tax by 7%. 7 cents. More local money stays local, and state pays more, and that's what we have to get to. Increased state share, and I will absolutely support the additional investment. We are still behind the other states in school funding. We must look at the revenue streams if we want to keep education a priority, and that's what we must do. We must keep the education, the public education, a priority in the state of Texas. This is where our future is produced, and if we're going to keep this sustainable, we have got to keep that focus on that, and we've got to get the state to pay more of its share.
Thank you, Mr. Brimage. So our second question regarding high-stakes testing and accountability. Mr. Henry, Texas currently uses an accountability system in which each district and campus is assigned a letter grade A through F. Especially in younger grades, this letter grade is entirely based on student performance on standardized tests. Many people have concerns about high-stakes standardized tests and their use in our A through F accountability system. What have you learned about the effects of state testing and accountability from being in schools and talking to constituents in the district?
I have seen tears, vomiting, diarrhea, and panic attacks, and that's the teachers. I've seen the unreasonable stress put on students and watched the joy of teaching and learning sucked out of our schools. If it isn't on the test, don't teach it. Practice, test, retest. Lock students and teachers in classrooms hour at a time, eating lunch in testing rooms, supervise students while they go to the bathroom. Students and teachers have lost valuable time to learn and teach. I've seen what we taught 37 years ago shrink year by year as more stress was put on standardized testing. I've lived and taught through TEAMS, TASK, TAX, and STAR, and I don't see that it's improved education in Texas. Accountability has to mean more than what a poor panicked 8-year-old does one day out of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Thames?
Thank you. You know, and I do visit a lot with especially the school superintendents and the principals. I had the opportunity to be on a strategic design team for Bay City ISD. We're going to present that to the board in a couple of days. And when it had students, it had teachers, parents, business leaders. It was an encompassing look at our education system, particularly at the high school. And this came up time and time and time again. Now, I'll be honest, I have yet to be able to find, and I've asked a lot, I've not been able to find a superintendent that will tell me that the STAR test isn't necessary. Now, I have a lot of teachers and a lot of parents and a lot of students, but that's okay because I don't want to put them on the spot like that. I think the STAR testing and all of this testing is a product of when we expected every child to go to college. As ridiculous as that sounds today, we implemented the 4x4 plan, and I know Governor Perry's goal was to have every student attend college. We're just not going to achieve that. There are kids that are ready right now as seniors, and certainly when they graduate, that'll be ready to go. They may need a certificate, they may need some OSHA training, And so I'm not in favor of continuing the STAR unless I can find somebody that can give me a good, solid background. Because we are putting a lot of stress on our teachers and a lot of stress on our students. And I'm good. I'm okay with benchmarking. I'm okay with benchmarking. Knowing where a student comes into the class and knowing where a student is when they leave the class. And I'm okay with that. I remember being tested in high school some million years ago. And so that's what I want to move for. I want to be smart. I want to talk to teachers. I want to talk to the administrators. I want to find out what you think, because you're the smartest person in the room when it comes to education.
Thank you, Mr. Thames. Mr. Basu?
I oppose STAR 100%. I think it tests above grade level. I don't think it's empirically valid. I think we need to replace it. I think we need to have some type of testing system, but it needs to be focused on measuring growth and not gauging student academic achievement, regardless of whether you have a learning disability or not, putting everybody into the same bucket, regardless of the demographic profile, regardless of the circumstances of the home environment, regardless of whether they're on free and reduced lunch. I think we have to have a testing system that's gauged at providing information to teachers that they then can use to be able to improve a child's education, not to hold schools accountable to lose funding. That's the way I envision an education testing program to be done. We have to have some type of education testing program because ESSA under federal law says you have to have a minimum number of tests. If you don't have them, you'll lose title funding, and we don't want to do that. But it should be the minimum amount of testing, and it should be focused on growth. Let me tell you about A through F, a little story. A good friend of mine is a teacher at Southside Elementary in Angleton ISD. Southside got a D this last year under the A through F rating. And a large part of that is geared off of standardized testing, and it's because of the weights that are given to individual students at that school. Depending on whether or not they come from a certain background, their test scores are weighted differently. And then when you talk about the tiers, about approaches or meets expectations, those tiers are set up that even if a kid scores a 58 and it improves to a 70 the next year, they will not have moved up a tier, so the school doesn't benefit. I think Southside has been unduly punished by that system. I don't think Southside is a D-rated school. And if a system rates Southside a D, then that system gets an F.
Thank you, Mr. Basu. Mr. Brimage?
Thank you. No one in public school believes an A through F is good. Accountability system, same for the state testing. They're experts. They are the experts. You, the teachers, are the experts. You don't believe in it, so why should we? The thing is, we can't listen to these large corporations that are making these tests and making huge profits off of them. We have to listen to our teachers. It's been proven over and over again that state assessment is flawed. It's written above grade level, as has been mentioned tonight. For a third grader to go in and test and on what he's been taught, and then have to go into remediation or intervention because he didn't read on a 5th grade level, it's not fair. And we know that it's happening, and we're the ones that have to make that change. It's a terrible system. It does not benefit anyone. It only hurts the schools, it hurts the teachers, and it hurts the parents. Also, our educators are under such high pressure from the students to pass these flawed above grade level exams. The state assessment becomes a curriculum teaching for which the test is a paper and pencil multiple choice exam. Our teachers and students are capable of so much more, so I do not support it.
Thank you, Mr. Brimage. Ms. Garrett?
At a recent forum that we were at, I had a 9-year-old who does not care for standardized testing approach me. And that's why she came to that forum, was to ask candidates about standardized testing. And I have a feeling, unless adult opinions are completely different from hers, that she is not alone in her disdain for the system. And I have learned that most constituents are not pleased with the standardized testing. But my answer is there has to be some way to measure what students are learning. Accountability in this context seems to be a revenue issue. There must be better ways to achieve accountability without placing dollar signs on it. We need to examine if there are other ways to incentivize. I think the objective to work towards solutions for a 50-50 share between the state and local jurisdictions can help alleviate some of this pressure from schools and school districts and possibly have an extrapolated effect on testing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. So our third question regarding vouchers. Mr. Thames, our public school system, including school districts and charters, serves 94% of students in Texas. Where do you stand on the use of public funds to support vouchers or similar programs for private schools?
You know, I know that during the last session and many sessions, this was a hot topic. There's 150 members in the House that all have a different type of school environment. But I'll tell you what it is in District 25, and that is it's our dollars needed to go to public schools. I will not support vouchers. If there's other areas in a very urban area that needs some help, then I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to work with them, I'm willing to negotiate. But a state-supported mandate of your child taking a check, a Texas check with them and going to another school is not going to help our public schools. It's not going to help that child. There's no accountability on the charter school sides. They don't follow the same rules. I just read, just briefly, with what little time I had to read, about charges or misappropriation of funds in some of those areas. Our school dollars need to stay in our public schools, period. It's very important that our kids take care. I'm not opposed. My son chose first couple of years to send his daughter to a private school. That was his decision. She now attends a public school. So I'll leave it to the parents to decide. But the Texas dollars, our tax dollars going to education, stays in public education. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thames. Mr. Basu?
I believe public money should be spent on public schools, not private schools, period. I believe in the inherent right of every single parent to be able to decide where their kid goes to school. Some kids are different. Some may benefit from a public school, some may benefit from a public charter school, some may benefit from a Christian school, some may benefit from homeschooling. It depends on the particular kid. I remember when I married my wife, Kate, and now I'm having a moment where I'm forgetting if I introduced her or not. And if I did not, I am married to my wonderful wife, Kate, who's here. Kate was a product of private school, went to BCS, K through 12. Her brother went to a combination of private school and homeschool and public school. He graduated from Brazos Wood High School. Her sister was a combination of private school and homeschool because each kid in that family had a different need. My family, we all went to public school. And so I do agree 100% that when it comes to public money, I want to be supporting my public school. One of the greatest things about moving back home is going to an Angleton High School football game. And in all of our, everybody in this room, we love Texas football. We love that environment to be able to experience that. The reason we're able to do that is because our public schools are integral to our communities. It's the pride in who we are. When I say I'm from Angleton, I'm a Wildcat. And I think then, in order to continue to have that pride in our schools and to continue to invest in them, public money has to remain with public schools. And so I oppose the voucher system from 2 or 4 years ago, and I don't think that that is coming back anytime soon.
Thank you, Mr. Basu. Mr. Grimmage?
I agree. I wholeheartedly do not support the voucher system, including tax credits or homeowner property taxes being used to fund private school education. I believe in public schools. I believe in public teachers. If a parent chooses to take their child to a private school, then they should have to pay for that, not with tax dollars. If a charter school receives 1 cent if a charter school receives 1 cent from a tax dollar, then that charter school should be held accountable to the same regulations and rules of any public school. And we have to see to that is put in place. Charter schools are not under the same financial transparencies as in the laws of public schools. There's no accountability. So again, I do not support the voucher system. I support tax dollars supporting public schools, public education.
Thank you, Mr. Grimmage. Ms. Garrett?
But the idea of public schools public funds going to private schools or vouchers has long been a key component of the school choice movement. But let's face it, there are a lot of different ways to define private school. So the question really being asked, should taxpayer dollars dedicated to education be spent anywhere outside the public school system? My answer is I support parents wanting to send their child to the school they think is best suited for them. And maybe there are options. The problem is we haven't had the right solution come forward yet. We have to ask further questions about what is the tax unit's obligation to the taxpayers and public at large. I am open to dialogue and further discussion on ideas for legislation. There's another example of where finding a balance between taxpayers and local government would be important, and why I would be most qualified to handle this as your state representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Mr. Henry?
I have two good friends that taught at both parochial and public schools. They stated private schools didn't want the requirements or the accountability placed on public schools. There are some tremendous private schools, and I don't fault a parent who wants to entrust their money and their child to them. I do not and will never support public money for private schools. I don't support vouchers for private charters, and I would urge candidates and voters to request a screening of Backpacks Full of Cash, narrated by Matt Damon. This documentary explains the effects of siphoning taxpayer dollars from public schools into charters. If we can have a constitutional amendment banning an income tax, why can't we have one barring the use of taxpayer dollars for private schools?
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Our fourth question regarding the teacher workforce. Mr. Vasut, Texas struggles to attract enough people to the teaching profession. Despite House Bill 3's required pay raise and enhancement to the teacher retirement system, Texas will still experience teacher shortages as our state grows. What can the state do to make teaching a more attractive option for young people?
By investing in public education, we send a signal that we value our teachers and we value this profession. So that is one way. But let me share a story with you that was referred to me by one of my constituents. You know, when you go to college to be a teacher, and depending on which school you go to, and programs differ. Sometimes you're not taught the practical side of teaching. You don't get as much of the hands-on learning that you do. And so when teachers get into these environments, they last about 3 years and then they fall off. So that's one problem. We have to make sure that our schools and our training programs are preparing teachers to be able to adjust to the classroom. And Mayor Henry said a story about one time substituting in an early childhood class. I substitute taught for a brief period of time, and I went to Westside Elementary to I think it was a second grade class. And I'll tell you guys, I had no practical training, and I was a fish out of water and knew absolutely nothing about what to do. And so I can only imagine the various situations that our teachers find themselves in on a day-to-day basis. How to deal with this particular type of student, a disrespectful student, or a student who's not paying attention, to manage their classroom. And if you don't have that hands-on training and that's not provided to you, I could see why you would burn out being a teacher. The second thing I would say is that we have to make sure that our teacher pay programs are rewarding people for years of service, broadening the pay scale range. It's one thing to have a high starting salary, but it's quite another to be able to pay our 5th and our 6th and our 7th year teachers even more to incentivize them to stay. And so that those that are in year 3 or year 4 have something to look forward to, get the training and resources they need, and to be able to remain teachers for the rest of their career. So it's a combination of pay, adequate training, and adequate support from the community. That's what I think.
Thank you, Mr. Vasut. Mr. Brimage?
Teachers, their profession is what makes all other professions possible. We are indebted to our teachers, whether it's an elementary school teacher that taught us to read, a junior high teacher who got us involved in extracurricular activities, a high school teacher that believed in us when no one else did, or got us involved in athletics. We owe that to our teachers to make our education priority every session. Each session we must address teacher pay. I'm on board with the 25 by 25. Let's make the great state of Texas the 25th per pupil spending by year 2025. we're not even close to the 25th currently, so we have a lot of work to do. The teachers and students of this great state are worth it. Our greatest pool of candidates are our students. So let's figure out programs, student incentives, what we can do to attract our current students to come back and teach our students now. We also must give our school boards local control in hiring teachers to teach highly specialized subjects that may not have teacher certificates, but are highly credentialed. Our career and technical courses, for example, several area school districts under the district innovation plan able to hire welders to teach welding, nurses to teach health science, engineers to teach robotics. That just makes sense. Colleges must make it easier for our students to be teachers. There's no reason why we should not have a place like where we sit tonight, Brazosport College, where a person can earn their teaching degree. That would be my solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brimage. Ms. Garrett?
This is certainly a perennial question, and the question would seem to beg to answer that we need to pay our teachers more in order to keep talent. I am glad, as mentioned, that our teachers received a much-deserved raise from this last legislative session. And it would be great if we could pay more money annually in order to increase retention. But it may be a fool's errand to say that and not look at the overall cost to doing so and making it sustainable. One innovative idea that I have to suggest is that perhaps we can be more aggressive with college programs, that there might be a reduced tuition rate if a student commits to a several-year tenure at a public school. It's going to take out-of-the-box ideas and aspiring to hit objectives of the 50-50 split between the state and local jurisdictions to make big things like higher teacher pay happen for our public school teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Mr. Henry?
I went through some great teacher preparation, but I got thrown in the deep end of the pool my first year of teaching. I love the incentives provided by House Bill 3 for meaningful mentoring programs. I think mentoring 2 years can greatly enhance the success of a new teacher and the chances that they'll be there after 5 years. Many of us entered our careers with unrealistic expectations. A veteran teacher's support and guidance would have been invaluable. Additionally, I think the state should consider tuition waivers for teachers willing to work in high-need areas or schools for 4 years. With housing costs soaring across Texas, outpacing increases in teacher pay, some type of housing stipend may be needed. Just curious, raise your hand if you worked a side gig to make ends meet during your teaching career. If you want teaching professionals, you need to pay professional salaries. If you want teaching professionals, give them the time to do their jobs, the respect given other professionals, and a seat at the table when decisions are made. How many professionals eat a 25-minute lunch at their desk, at the copy machine, while they use the paper they had to bring to make copies, or even in the bathroom? I'm not going to have people raise their hand if they ate their lunch in the bathroom. Also, if you go to TEA's website, they have a series of videos, 3 for $30, and you can see where your $5,000 raise went. So you might want to check that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Thames?
I think we need to make it, I think we need to make it cool again. To make it cool. In the 70s, everybody wanted to be a teacher. A lot of people wanted to go be a teacher. And I see the statistics when they talk about, when somebody leaves a job, whether it's a teacher or in industry, a lot of times it's not necessarily the money. It was the boss or the respect or the ability to have their own say. I believe we need to listen to the teachers. I think we need to listen to today's students. Make it cool again, make it modern, make it exciting. Certainly pay is a lot. One of the things we do in Matagorda is I've gone around to the apartment complexes, and I'm asking them to give me 10 or 12 apartments at a reduced rate for a teacher. The way I sell that is that you know that a teacher is going to be a stability force in your apartment complex. I haven't gotten there yet. A lot of them are studying, but those are the kinds of things that I think we need to do as a community. We as a community need to work together, and I'm talking about local control. I'm not talking about Austin coming down and telling you what to do so that we can get more teachers into the classroom. That's the last thing. I think we need to free you up, free the administrators up. Let's listen to the school superintendents and those on the front line. I'll bet you they'll tell us what it takes to get more teachers into the classroom, to get them going into college wanting to be a teacher. I do know that some of our industries are stealing teachers away with higher pay, so we need to address that and combine. So the community, industry, parents, and teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thames. So our next question regarding 313 agreements is a two-part question. First, Mr. Brimage, what are your thoughts on a school district's ability to offer value limitations or tax abatements under the Texas Economic Development Act, which is up for renewal next legislative session? This is a program that allows school districts to take taxable value for new manufacturing and energy projects off the property tax rolls for 10 years. School districts do not lose any funding due to how the state and company offset the revenue losses.
Well, this is not a long answer. I think that there's no doubt that we have to fight to keep the 312 and the 313 alive. Whatever we do, as long as industry continues to grow and continues to ask for these abatements, and if we're going to attract that growth, we have to support that in Austin, and we have to keep the 313 available for the school districts.
Thank you, Mr. Brimage. Ms. Garrett?
In my understanding of the 313, technically the school districts are not taking taxable value from the rolls. It just limits the amount of value that is placed on the roll from a new project for up to a 10-year period. The good part of that is the debt service obligation of the district is paid on 100% of the taxable value of that new project. And of course, the schools do not lose their state funding on the other side. I am all for the renewal of 313s. I am familiar with the sunset process, and that's what Section 313 will be going through with the Department. I went through this process with the Department of Motor Vehicles last session, and I will be watching the 313 discussion closely. I want to protect the current 313 agreements and make sure they are grandfathered as changes that may come due to sunset review. And I'll answer the rest of it on the other part. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Mr. Henry?
These are essential. We still have what I call Robin Hood Light. Without a 313 agreement, your hard work to grow your tax base results in a smaller per student payment by the state. They no longer take your money, they just don't send you as much. School taxes are the biggest part of a property tax bill. 313 agreements help keep Texas economic growth alive.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Thames?
So the 313 is designed to attract industry into your community, into our community. And let me tell you why. There's literally 3,000 economic development corporations out there trying to steal every project there is. There are states. I know that Louisiana is very active, Oklahoma, Alabama, Mississippi. They have professionals going out. So for us in Texas to compete, we've got to have the tax incentive processes like the 313. I will tell you that, and I was so proud that the legislature took care of the 312s. So the 312 agreements are set until the next sunset, so we're good there. But I'm going to tell you, you need to have a state rep that goes to Austin that can communicate, that can unify, and that can bring the majority together. Our 313 agreement in the Senate is in trouble. My own senator, Lois Kokhorst, I go into her office and she holds her hand up and says, I know, Mitch, I know. I know you want the 313 agreement. Van Vleck ISD right now has Tanaris Bay City. If we did not have the 313 agreement, it would have been Tanaris Lake Charles. I assure you, I've talked to them. And so the 313 agreements are so very important. I also continue to want to keep them there, but I'm telling you, it's going to be a hard fight in the Senate. We've got to have somebody in Austin that can go over to the Senate, work with them, and keep the 313 agreements in a solid ground. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thames. Mr. Basu?
So without a 313, we can't attract the type of industrial growth that we've seen across HD 25. And I think particularly on this issue, this is a classic example of people that don't live in this area, representatives from other parts of the state, looking on this as some type of giveaway by the state and not understanding the impact that it has on our communities. I talked to a superintendent, I'm not going to name any names, but he came from outside this area. And before he came here, he thought 313s were just crazy. Why are you doing it? It's corporate giveaway. When he came here, aha, I understand the importance of 313s and 312s. We've got to have them to attract investment. And there's two important things about it. One, you don't lose any revenue in the school districts. The state makes it up. And in addition to that, the tax revenue is only abated on the M&O side. The INS side is still paid at full freight, which allows you to have the funds in Angleton to do our bond that we just passed, for Brazosport ISD to do their bonds, which they passed. Van Vleck to do their bonds, which you guys got a beautiful facility over there. I was block walking there recently. So without 312s and 313s, our school districts would not be able to have the funds they need to provide the facilities they need to teach the kids that we need to learn to be the future for our area. So critical, I'll fight to keep.
Thank you, Mr. Basout. And the second part, Ms. Garrett, do you believe school districts should be limited in the amount of supplemental benefits they can negotiate with the company? And do you believe only certain projects should be eligible for the program, such as manufacturing versus wind and solar?
As far as supplemental benefits and eligible projects, that is a conversation that will come up in Sunset. And they may actually have some better ideas. It should be no less than what's currently in statute. But the sunset process may reveal other information that might be helpful, and will be some good legislation to add some additional elements.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Mr. Henry?
Well, I'll preach a little bit on the next question about local control. But as a former mayor, I believe in home rule and local control. And I believe that with the taxpayers' oversight, local school boards should make the decisions on the scope and type of 313 agreements that fit their particular communities. Local school boards should make local decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Mr. Thames?
Absolutely local control, but I will tell you that, again, in the Senate, they're trying to limit what's going on for our 313 agreements, and that's where we've got to have leadership, and we've got to talk to them. I'm okay with the ability to have the program for solar, wind, the 313 for manufacturing projects, and then I'll leave it to the local folks, the folks that I see every day, that I run across in meetings, and I'll let them decide whether they want to limit it in their community. So yes, I support that. In other areas, the companies understand that they're limited. We just did a deal with Lodestar. It's a midstream company. They do not qualify for the 313. Didn't ask for it. It was not a part of the negotiations. And so there's the current law is working. But we've got to go to Austin. We've got to be strong, especially in the Senate. I think the House, I think that's going to be safe in the House. I know it's in trouble in the Senate. There are folks that think that's corporate welfare. It's certainly in. We've got to have the jobs. We've got to be able to take care of our community. Because I'm telling you, if we are not growing, and thank goodness right now we are, we're not growing, we're dying. And we have got to make sure that we are out there working with the economic development corporations, working with counties and cities, making sure that we have every tool in the toolbox that we can possibly have to compete with these other states. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thames. Mr. Basout?
I certainly don't believe that the supplemental amounts should be any less than they currently are. Our school districts need to have the flexibility to continue to do what they're doing. Whether we expand it to additional types of businesses to be attracted, I think what we have to look at is, what are we trying to accomplish here? We're trying to bring in new jobs to our areas. And so if there's a different industry that has high-paying jobs that we want to target and expanding the scope of 312s and 313s to that, I'm open to it, because overall, whenever we bring new jobs in, there are multipliers. Mitch knows this very well. There are multipliers depending on the type of industry that comes in. If we attract industries with higher multipliers, that means for every job that's created in that particular project, we get anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 additional jobs. Some of them are like 11, I think. So there are industries that we need to make sure that we can target with these agreements. Because when those new jobs come in, those people pay sales taxes. That sales tax then goes to Austin and offsets the cost of this to the taxpayer. So it's a win-win. I don't like win-wins. I don't know if anybody in here is opposed to win-wins. What a platform plank that would be. But I also believe in local control. I believe our school board should have flexibility to negotiate these agreements to get additional benefits. If we have to put in any type of restriction, the only idea behind it would be to protect school boards from being overrun by businesses in negotiations. At some point in time, there has to be a walkaway, and they have to have the power to be able to do that. But I certainly do not support the flexibility our local school districts have with 312s and 313s.
Thank you, Mr. Bassoon. Mr. Brimage?
Without repeating what the three gentlemen said on the end, local control is the answer. Austin doesn't know what District 25 needs. Austin doesn't know what BISD needs. Austin doesn't know what Freeport, Texas needs. We need to give the local elected officials who are face-to-face with the people, the constituents, on a daily basis, who elected them into office to make the decisions for the local people. That you can't tell me that success comes from when the superintendent of BISD can negotiate and work with the mayor of Lake Jackson or the mayor and the council of Freeport to get the job done. If we leave it up to Austin, it'll never get done. So we have to, the answer is local control, and if it needs to be expanded to get new industry, if it needs to be expanded to bring progress to District 25, then this is the right thing to do. And that's what I would support.
Thank you, Mr. Brimage. Our last question regarding local control. Mr. Henry, what should the state's role be versus a local school board's role be in determining what is best for the local community? And how do you believe school districts would be affected by the passage of legislation like the taxpayer-funded lobbying bill?
Constitutionally, the state of Texas is responsible for the education of Texas children. However, Austin can't determine what's best for a Danbury or a Tidehaven or a Van Vleck. And that's why we have local school boards. We know our board members, and we elect them to do the best for our children. We can remove them if they don't. The taxpayer-funded lobbying bill was an attack on the Texas Association of School Boards, the Texas Municipal League, and the Texas Association of Counties. These groups that provide advocacy for the Danburys, the Tidehavens, that otherwise wouldn't have a voice in Austin. I don't see that as a lobby, but rather a much-needed advocate for the Austin power grab on Texas counties, cities, and school districts.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Control to me in charge. I see these individuals in the grocery store, and I have the ability, although some of them go into the next aisle, so when they see me, they don't want to talk to me. But local control means just that. We can visit with our leaders. We have elected them locally. We support them locally. And that's exactly what I see as local control. And I do see a power grab in Austin. When they come down and move the tax rate raises from 8 down to 2.5 and 3.5%, 2.5, 3.5 cents with a required rollback, that is not local control. That is too strong. We tried to negotiate. We tried to get it around the 5 mark with petitioning, and that didn't work. But every time I get an opportunity, I'm going to make sure that I'm listening to the local officials, and I'm going to make sure that I side with the local officials making those decisions, because that's who you vote for. You're voting for those individuals, whether it's every 2, 3, 4 years. You're voting for them, and you're the one holding them accountable. I don't want Austin to hold them accountable. I will tell you this, if there are bad actors in the state, and there are bad actors in the state, then I want the legislature to deal with them. I don't like the shotgun approach where we just shoot everybody. Let's go in and fix the areas that need fixing. I watched Harris County try to force an 8% tax raise on their constituents at the last second before the restrictions went in. So I'm here for local, and I think you have the vote and you have the voice. You're local. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thames. Mr. Basu?
Local control to me means local control over local issues. Oftentimes on city councils, I use this example. Where to locate a park? Local issue. What tax rate is that? Local issue. You ought to have that authority, that flexibility. Where the state comes in, a lot of times, I do agree there is a little bit of a target there, and I don't like that. But I think a lot of times the state also steps in because everybody in the legislature has constituents that are in this room as well, and some may come and complain about abuses of local control, and that can occur. But we have to be careful that in addressing any abuses of local control, I do agree with Mitch, not having a shotgun approach where we deprive local control from others that are good actors. Particularly for school boards. I think our school boards need a lot more flexibility than they have. Did you know that when it comes to setting policy and programs, city councils have far more flexibility in what they can do than what a school board does, because you're hamstrung by the education code, you're hamstrung by so many rules and regulations. Talk about standardized testing. It'd be nice if our school boards could be able to come up with their own type of standardized testing system that meets some type of broad state standard so that we can have innovation in our district. See, every district should be a district of innovation. Everybody should have that flexibility because I trust our school boards, and I think that the free market of ideas in our schools will give us the best form of education, not a one-size-fits-all that's based off of the latest survey or research of the day that may change tomorrow. How would the last session's taxpayer-funded lobbying bill impact school boards? It was overly broad. And in its application, it would have negatively impacted the ability of school boards to be able to lobby in Austin. Not necessarily lobby, but to raise issues. So I'm not for targeting that. I think, though, when I'm elected as a state rep, you won't need a lobbying association to come to me. You pick up the phone and call me anytime. I answer to everybody in this room, and if I'm not, vote me out.
Thank you, Mr. Basu. Mr. Brimage?
As a mayor of a local town and as a school board member, again, I 100% support local control. A couple of months ago, I was in Austin at the Business Roundtable presenting to them, and this question came up, and it wasn't hard to answer, but after I answered it, and I said in front of all the people in Austin at the Business Roundtable that I support local control, when we walked out of the room, the lady said, "Are you crazy?" And I said, "No, because I've lived it, and I understand that Austin does not understand what Freeport, what Lake Jackson, what BISD, what Sweeney ISD, they don't understand what they need. And so we have to advocate, and we have to make sure that local control remains in the hands of the folks that you elect here locally." And again, I'm with Cody on the lobbying. I'm going to be your lobbyist. I'm going to be your full-time ear. I'm going to go to Austin for you, and I'm going to make sure that you get what you need, because I'm going to listen to you.
Thank you, Mr. Brimage. Ms. Garrett?
As a Republican, I'm in favor of limited government. Local control is important and essential when it comes to education. The state doesn't need to micromanage. And I will go one step further and say that all lobbying needs to be reformed. I'm not in favor of any taxing entities having lobbyists. Elected officials should represent their constituents. But this issue will come up again at the next legislative session. And this is where your relationship with your state representative is imperative. I agree with them. I will be your lobbyist. But I'm open to considering government relations representatives who work with those entities participating in the legislative process if an elected official can't make it to Austin, as opposed to reliance on registered lobbyists for public education. Your local representative can come and talk on your account, on your behalf, even though your elected official may not be able to get there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Each of the candidates will now have 1 minute for a closing statement. Mr. Thames or Mr. Henry?
Should we have to pick one? I think,
No, Mr. Thames, my apologies.
Education is going to be one of my biggest priorities. My father-in-law was an educator. My mother was an educator. My daughter went into teaching. She was a debate and speech teacher. So what you do is so very important to what we do. What you do is our future. Again, I'm telling you, take some of the our most precious things that we possess, and that's our kids and our grandkids. And you need the support in Austin. You need the support in your local districts, and that's what we're going to do. I want to say thank you to Raise Your Hand. Appreciate everything. Thank you to the school districts. Thank you for this beautiful facility. We appreciate you. Please vote MitchThames.com. Vote Mitch Thames Facebook. Vote Mitch Thames March 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thames. Mr. Vasu?
thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. It shows that you are taking this election seriously. And I think we all should. And I want to encourage everybody in this room, be an educated voter. Don't make a decision in this race based off of who filed first, whether they're your friend, whether they're your family member, but who is the most qualified candidate to represent your interest in Austin. See, I'm not afraid of you going to check out all the videos that are out there. We've done a lot of forums. We've covered a lot of other issues beyond education and compare each and every one of us. I'm not afraid of that because I believe when you do, you'll find that I'm the most qualified to represent you. And that's not based off of any pie-in-the-sky promises, but real, tangible policies to deliver positive change for our communities. That's what I'm about. And part of that is delivering for public education. So thanks again. VoteVasut.com. Vote Vasut on March 3rd. God bless.
Thank you, Mr. Vasu. Mr. Burbidge?
I want to thank BISD and Raise Your Hand. Thank you very much. This is a first-class forum. Thank you, everyone, for showing up and showing your support for District 25. You know, the first public office that I ran for was school district, school board, board of trustees for BISD. So public education is truly dear to my heart, and I will continue that fight for public education. I am the only candidate rated friendly to public education, and I want you to know that you'll have an open door, you'll have an open phone. I will always work with the superintendents and administrators and the teachers to make sure that public education is at the top of the list in the state of Texas. So again, I want to thank you. Vote Troy Brimage for District 25, BrimageForTexas.com. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Brimage. Ms. Garrett?
Again, thank you all for being here tonight. It's been a privilege to be in front of you. The future of public education is tied up in school funding, which is funded with taxpayer money. HB 3 made reforms, but those reforms need to be sustainable. And there is much work to be done to secure the funding of our schools while still giving property tax relief at the local level. I am by far the most qualified to assume this incredibly important task when it comes to property tax relief. And I ask you humbly for your vote and support as your state representative for House District 25. RobinGarrett.com, Robin Garrett Campaign on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett. Mr. Henry?
The future of public education is the future of Texas. We can't continue to be competitive. We can't continue to be an economic powerhouse if we continue to lag in education. HB 3 can be a blueprint for change, but as all blueprints, it must be followed and modified when needed. We must make our children and our educators our first priority. We need a representative in Austin with the determination to make that happen. I can be that representative. for our families, for our future. Para nuestras familias, para nuestro futuro. My name is Patrick Henry, and I'm running for state representative in House District 25. Mi nombre es Patrick Henry y estoy postulando para representante estatal en el Distrito 25. Thank all of you for being here, and I know that you teachers need to get home and grade those papers.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Thank you all so very, very much for a great, robust discussion. We're very proud. Let's give these candidates one great round of applause once again. They will be here, of course, we'll be here till 8 o'clock at the latest, but they'll be here to meet and greet out in the lobby. We have some cookies and water, if you'd like, of course. I want to say a few thank yous. Tiffany Cook from the Dow Academic Center and her team have been fantastic in hosting us here. Let's give them a round of applause. In the lobby, we have a League of Women Voters. If you are not registered, please register to vote. They have been very gracious in helping us at many of our forums across the state. So let's give the League of Women Voters. I want to thank Dr. Robert Long, who just stepped out. Dr. Long is my friend and colleague. He is the Regional Advocacy Director for West Houston for Raise Your Hand, Texas. And Robert, thank you so much for your coming down here and helping support. Dr. Long. This is a great event. It takes a lot of folks. Without the leadership team, students and staff from Brazosport ISD, this simply would not have been possible. And I want to give special thanks to Mr. Danny Massey, and our wonderful co-moderator, Catherine Fielder. As well as Mr. Brent Jaco, Chief of Staff of Brazosport ISD. And thank you for keeping time, sir. Ms. Karen Mott, Principal at Griffith Elementary. Karen is also one of our Raise Your Hand Texas Principal Advocacy Fellows. She participated, as did Dr. Long, when he was a principal in a Harvard Fellowship program that is funded by Raise Your Hand Texas. So she has been a great, great support partner here in this area for us. So we thank you, Karen. One of the most important things that several candidates alluded to, one of the most important things each of you can do is to stay informed. Public education is critical. Issues change. Everything is happening very rapidly between now and the primaries. I want you, if you can, take a moment to register with Raise Your Hand Texas for legislative alerts. We promise we will not flood you, but we have a wealth of research, of current information, and we want to make sure you're aware of what's going on. We have sheets out on the tables, the sign-in tables. You can go to our website and register. You can text and register, or you can scan the handy-dandy QR code and register for alerts and other messages from our organization. Yard signs. Show your support. Robert has one right there. We have plenty of yard signs you can take that show in your neighborhoods, in your school districts, in your communities that we support public education. And finally, that we do the most important thing we can do as Texans and U.S. citizens, exercise our right to vote. Vote your beliefs, be informed. Most importantly, keep in mind that the future of Texas is in our public schools. We thank you so very, very much. It's been a great evening. Have a safe trip home. Thank you. Candidates, could I get you to stay?